Okay, so this is the PC mentoring call on November 9th. Few things we're going to start about and then talk about lead gen, which some of that is a mixture of a few things. First of all, there's a thing called net sheets, and I want to talk about what a net sheet actually is. When you have a net sheet, that is when, if you're talking to a seller, a net sheet is after everything is said and done, after everybody is paid, after all of that sort of thing, how much are they going to get in their checking account? So, and that's what you're trying to find out. So in fact, I'm trying to look up one of the net sheets I have offhand to give you an idea of that, because that'll be a question that comes up, and it's a little bit hard because like, oh, you know, what does that mean? Now, there's a few places you can get net sheets. One of them can be, a lot of times a title rep can provide them. And usually those are estimates. And by the way, almost all net sheets are estimates too. So you can't look at a net sheet and go, oh, that's exactly you. When you tell somebody this is what a net sheet is, you're letting them know, hey, this is approximately what you're planning on getting something. For instance, let me share my screen on a net sheet. And okay, so here's like a net sheet, and it kind of breaks it down. This is a property for Long Beach. And a lot of times if you use an escrow company, they'll give you a little bit more detailed net sheets. Your title reps do a good job with it too. And again, it's just an estimate. Some of the questions that they're always going to ask, because agent commissions come out of the proceeds usually of a sale of a home. So they have to find out what is the overall commission rate. Now, if you're talking, if you're a typical transaction, there's always exceptions, but a typical transaction, the listing agent will ask for a certain amount of commission. So let's say they ask for 6%. And in our current market, usually if an agent asks for 6%, it's 6% of the sale of the home. So if the home is going, let's just make it easy, okay? So if the home is going for $1 million, that would be $60,000. Then they offer the buying agent part of that commission. So if, and in this market, if it's a 6%, usually they're offering 2.5%. So that means that they're keeping $35,000 and they're giving away $25,000 to the buying agent. And, but whenever you're trying to figure out a net sheet for a seller, it's the total commission. So it's not just the listing agent side, but it's the total commission they're going to be paying out. So in the case of $1 million, it would be at a 6%, it would be $60,000 in commission. So if you notice, like on this sheet here, the commission is one of the big boys taken out of it. Another one are the property taxes that are figured out. So whenever you give like information to escrow, they need to know the address of the property. They need to know the commission rate, because then that'll help them figure out what are the taxes, how much is being taken out. And then that's when they put in all the other information. And then usually at the bottom, you'll see net proceeds or something close to that. That is a net sheet. That's telling you, okay, if like in this instance, if the place was going to sell for $900,000 and the commission was going to be $54,000 with everything else also taken out, that means they would take home $838,000 out of that $900,000 sale. So that lets you know, okay, this is what you can give someone and say, this is what your net will be. That's a net sheet. Now, sometimes a buyer sheet, and a lot of times your lenders will help with that. A buyer's sheet would be something on what would it take to purchase this? And what's going to be your total closing costs? That's what they want to know. Because for a buyer, they're putting all this money out there to purchase the property. So what they want to know is what is going to be their overall closing costs that they're going to need. So that takes into account the amount that they put down, takes into account the closing costs on the loan, and that takes into account the escrow fees as well. Most transactions, when you're trying to figure this out, it's usually standard out there that you want to put in, even in the contract, each pay their own. If you put 50-50 split on a contract, by the way, it may not be 50-50 because the total amount due for the seller side and the total amount due for the buyer side can actually be two different amounts. So if you put 50-50, you're making one of those sides pay more than what they should be paying. And even though it may seem small, people get a little bit upset over that. So if you put each pay their own, it even makes everybody feel like, okay, I'm only paying what I'm supposed to be paying, and then that's it. That's usually how it breaks down. And usually, by the way, when it comes to like title insurance, the seller normally pays for that. However, now I'm saying what is normal. All deals can be done differently, and there's reasons for doing all of that. So sometimes in these net sheets, you need to account for some of that. That's the reason why I'm bringing it up now. For instance, I have a few investors that when they make offers, they will, and so they're the buyer, by the way, let's talk about that. They will pay for the title. They'll even pay for both sides of escrow. But then usually they're asking for their preferred companies to be used, their title company and their escrow company. And sometimes that'll be, in the contract. And I have two investors that do that a lot. And both my investors will just let me know, hey, by the way, we'll pay for title and we'll pay for all the escrow fees. However, we want to use our companies. So that's just how it works. But usually if it's in, a seller of a single family residential, townhouse, condo, whatever, and then it's a regular buyer just wanting to move into that, then usually this is how it breaks down. Sometimes you'll have some buyers that will say, hey, we'll pay for title, and hey, we'll pay for escrow. And that's lovely. But when you have competing offers, it doesn't add up to as much as just giving them more money, basically. So that's a net sheet. Any question on net sheets? Okay, that sounds good. The next thing I wanted to talk about was 1031 exchanges. We're not going to go deep into that because literally there's entire courses on it. But if you hear about a 1031 exchange, that means that it's usually an investment property. And it encourages people who have investment properties to keep upgrading their investment property. So let's say you have a duplex, and the duplex would normally sell for $800,000. Well, what a 1031 exchange, it encourages somebody maybe to go to a fourplex and that would cost more, 1.1 million, something like that. Well, how does it do that? The 1031 exchange allows them to go ahead and take their tax base from the original to the next one, and that same tax base goes over. Now, it's not going to be the same dollar amount, but it's going to be the same tax base, and that would have to be figured out. Usually it's the same percentage. So then that way it encourages them to purchase, bigger property, and then more of the entry-level properties become available for newer investors. So investors who've been doing it now for a little while, they keep upgrading, and then that frees up inventory for the newer investors. So that's why it's called the 1031 exchange, and you hire a company that will help facilitate that. You usually should. There's a number of companies out there that's all they do, and they know how to do this really, really well. What's the caveat to that? Well, because you're going to hear about there has to be a target property and there has to be a certain amount of days. Sacramento doesn't like that because they feel they're getting cheated out of taxes. So what they did is that they made the window to do a 1031 exchange only 45 days. And as you've been exposed into the real estate business, a 45-day window is adequate, but that's still a short window. You have to identify the property you want to purchase, and you have to be in the escrow, and you have to make sure everything's done on time. So that's the reason why you usually have a company that also handles the 1031 exchange, because they help with all of that. But that would mean that, let's say you have somebody who's listed a duplex out there and it's going to go for $700,000 and they're going to close on December 1st. They need to have a target property identified that they're going to purchase and take the proceeds of those funds and put into the new property, so they don't get taxed on any profit from that original property. And then they also get the tax base going into the new property. That's why you do a 1031 exchange. So if you're looking at it, somebody, and if it's even if it's a single family residential, if it's a rental property, it could still be subject to a 1031 exchange. So that's how a 1031 exchange works. And like I said, there's full seminars on it out there, but just so you're aware, hey, that's how that breaks down. Any questions on 1031 exchange? Yeah.
Can they?
Oh, you can go first.
You go ahead.
Okay, so is the 1031 exchange for exchanging property of equal value or higher, or is it that if it's lower, the difference is what's getting taxed? Is that how it works?
Good question. You're wanting to go into equal value or higher. So okay. Because they're upgrading. The idea is that they're upgrading their rental income property.
So if that's the case, if you, for example, sell this property for 1 million, are you allowed to exchange for 2 properties for 500K if you already have like the target?
You should be able to, and that's why you definitely would want a company, like you have a 1031 exchange company, because all that paperwork has to be filed correctly. If something's not filed correctly, it can get kicked back. And so I can even tell you that the title for my home, we changed the title to my home, and we tried to go through this one company that said that they could facilitate it, and it got kicked back twice. So finally I went to my title company and I said, guys, I'll pay you regular escrow fees, just please handle this for me. And they did. And because they handled it and they knew exactly how to get everything done, within 45 days, we had everything changed and we were good. So, you don't want a 1031 exchange. You don't want to take a chance. If there are 2 target properties they're trying to go into, make sure it's all cleared first, because you don't want that coming the last minute. Michael, did you have a question?
Yeah, and so you can do it for residential properties because I'm familiar with doing them for commercial properties, but you can do them for residential as well?
As long as it's not primary residence, if it's an income property.
Oh, okay, got it.
Oh, wait, let me modify that. As long as it's an income property, if it's, let's say, a duplex and you're living in one of the duplexes, then that could be a situation you might be able to apply. So, because a lot of times, and little side note, on the west side of town and of LA, a lot of your duplexes are huge and they're beautiful. And, it's like, yeah, they were designed to be owner occupied in one of the units, and then the other unit is rented out. On my side of town, the duplexes tend to be more like apartment style, 2 bedroom, 1 bath, 1 bedroom, 1 bath, but nothing fabulous, sort of thing. They're great. I mean, don't get me wrong, but nothing where it was designed necessarily to always be owner occupied. So it depends on the property itself, of course, whether it's going to be owner occupied or not.
Got it.
Okay. Any more questions on 1031?
I guess I have one more. Is there a limit of how many times you can defer it, or you can keep deferring as long as you keep exchanging it, but not really just sell it?
Good question. There is a limit. I can't tell you the exact limit, but a lot of things like this, they do put a limit on, because they don't want also somebody, rigging the system and constantly overturning, properties, because then, something comes into that just doesn't work well either. So even when it comes to, like right now, property taxes being protected, when it comes to, and right now we just had that proposition go through recently that changes how property taxes are handled. Whereas like before it used to be, this is a little segue, but it's going to come into question. It used to be that you would have 7 counties in California all participating, and all the counties around us, you know, like LA County, Orange County, you know, they all participated in it, where you could take your tax base with you, or give it, or if the property's inherited, your kids get it. So that would happen where, and this is on single family residential, but it's still a tax question. Then they would go ahead and, for instance, my mom's home is worth, I think, $850,000. So if she were to move into another home, she would be allowed to take her tax base with her and not got reassessed like it's a brand new home. That allows her to do that. What has happened is that's been modified to where there was a pro side and a con side. The pro side is now all of California qualifies for that. So let's say my mom always wanted to retire up into the Redwoods. She can now sell her home now, go anywhere in California, including the Redwoods, and purchase a home up there and take her tax base with her. So yay. The part that changed is it doesn't necessarily go to the kids. There's a limit, and please look this up. I believe the limit is if it's over $1 million, then it starts to get assessed a little bit, even when the kids inherit it. If it's less than $1 million, it just goes straight to the kids, because that's it's like a Prop 13 kind of protection. But again, look that up, because some of that, you know, is happening. But that's one of those things. And even then, they're allowed to do it, I want to say 3 times something. I know there's a limit on it, because that way my mom isn't, let me move here, let me move here, let me move there, let me move there. You know, it's like, okay, you can only take advantage of this so many times and then you're done. So they purposely put a limit on it so it's not overused. Any other questions on that? Okay. I was also sent some really good questions. Any tips for door knocking? So right now, if you're door knocking, right now is an excellent time of year to door knock, because people tend to be more open. Now, I would say whenever you're door knocking, do something that's seasonal. So if you can. So let's say it's around, you know, springtime, and everybody has those little peeps, you know, in the stores and that kind of stuff. You can buy the little peeps and you know, door knock, or and this is one thing I want to say. I also understand if you're on a budget. So if you want to make something cute, but literally it's like, well, I only want to spend $1 for peeps and go to 99-cent store, Dollar Tree, and pick up those things. But I can't afford to give away 100 of those. And, you know, now it costs me $100. Fine. You can door knock and say, hey, I'm just door knocking with my peeps, and just leave it at that. And then, you know, it's like, oh, it's cute. And then you could give them something, you know, like a little Popeye or whatever that talks about that. And then you can have a conversation. Right now, this time of year, you know, we're in Thanksgiving time, and we have that coming up. Hanukkah is at the end of the month. We have Christmas in December. So you have all of this holiday stuff going on. So anything that can relate with the holidays, you know, is really helpful with that. I actually sent you guys some Popeyes on that recently. And what those are designed is there's 6 on a page, and you can even print them double-sided, because both sides would be different. People kind of like it because it has all these stupid sayings in there. Yay, because people enjoy that kind of stuff. It's different. And let me tell you what, I am very used to people coming to my house and door knocking and saying, hi, I'm with blah, blah, blah window company. Hi, I'm with blah, blah, blah this. Hi, I'm with blah, blah, blah with that, you know, sort of thing. In fact, it's funny, sometimes they'll even come up and we have just had something replaced on our house, and they're like, hi, I'm here, you know, asking about this, and like tankless hot water heaters. And I'm like, well, we have a tankless one. Oh, well, have you thought about maybe upgrading yours? No, seriously, we just put one in. Why am I going to upgrade it? You know, but that's all they do. And it is very close, because I'm done. I'm done talking with you. Okay. I've got things to do. But if somebody comes up and they have something like on Thanksgiving, and like one of the Popeyes I have, you know, it actually, and this is where it's hokey, but it says, "Oh my gourd." And by the way, for those of you who don't know, a gourd is any of those like smaller squashes, pumpkins, that the other name for what a gourd is. So that's the reason why it says, "Oh my gourd, I appreciate all of my clients." And it's like, okay, that's really a dumb joke, but it's a bad dad joke. I get it. But the cool thing about it is it gets you a conversation going. And that's where you can even take little stupid plastic pumpkins with you, you know, plastic gourds, shop on Amazon. If you want a live one, go to Trader Joe's. Trader Joe's sells a bunch of those gourds for like 59 cents, $1, that kind of thing. And it allows you to door knock and actually kind of have a conversation. If you come to somebody's door and you immediately start with, "Hi, I'm looking at, if you're looking at buying or selling in the neighborhood." "No, thank you," click, and you're done. And that goes nowhere. If you create a conversation, then that starts to go somewhere. Now, one thing I've mentioned before is that if you compliment people, people appreciate that. So I've used that for many times, and it's not fake. So, you know, if somebody has really a bad hair day, I'm not going to say, "Oh my God, you have a great hair day." Oh, no, I don't think so. I'm not gonna do that. But if somebody has on like great shoes, I happen to notice great shoes. So if somebody has great shoes on, I'm like, "Oh my God, I love those shoes," you know, sort of thing. Then that immediately starts to create a rapport. You've complimented someone. Somebody will talk. And if they are great shoes, they'll even tell you, "Hey, thank you. I got these at blah, blah, blah." You know, I do that all the time. You know, I had people, I recently just got married, and people complimented like, "Oh my God, your and Jamal's shoes were beautiful." And immediately I'm starting to talk about it. I'm like, "Well, yes, mine were Magnanis. I bought Jamal Meslands." It just creates that conversation. So if it's one-on-one, that's one of those things. If you're door knocking, compliment the home. You know, what do you see in the home? Now, most homes are going to be easy to do. There's something to pick out. The times it's going to be difficult to pick out. If you're in a neighborhood that's cookie cutter, every home looks exactly alike. You know, it's a recent development. Most likely in LA, you're not going to find that. So, okay. Even then, that's even one of those things you can compliment. Like, "Hey, I love these homes. I think this neighborhood's a great neighborhood. I just love the way it's laid out. I even like the approach to your home." You can still do that, you know, in that sort of manner, even though they all kind of look a little bit generic. I also have dealt with a home that in Whittier that the people have lived there for years, and the front yard is kind of like a jungle. And so what I did is, as I walked up, I'm not going to compliment like, "Wow, your home is so not kept up in the yard." I'm not going to do that. I did notice they had a pomegranate tree. So when I walked up, I said, you know, the first thing I said to him was like, "Hi, I'm Rob. And first of all, I just want to say, I love the fact you have a pomegranate tree. You don't see those all the time. That is just so cool. You know, it's unique. And I think pomegranates are great." They were like, "Oh, you know what? We planted that 20." I mean, they literally started to tell us, "We planted that 20 years ago, and it just keeps producing every year." That is really, really cool. By the way, I'm Rob. I'm a realtor in the area. And I was just coming to everybody's home and just wanting to introduce myself. And then I was able to talk. And then you're able to create that rapport. You're able to do that sort of thing. Now, let me give you a big tip. If somebody has a dog, such as example, compliment them on the dog, okay? If people have a dog, they love their animals. So compliment on the dogs, you know, any of those sort of things. Also, when you're door knocking, all of these things that you're talking about, compliments and so on, have some sort of pad with you, something to take notes on. And if you want to do it on your phone too, you can do that well if you're that adept. But go ahead and take notes on the address. If you've got their name, even if it's just their first name, if you got their name and any of the things you chatted about, including if you complimented them on something. Because then when you follow up, you're able to more effectively have a conversation with them. Also in that, it allows you to, like, let's say somebody does have a conversation with you and you were to come to my house and you were to compliment me about my dogs, you know, and that sort of thing. And then you send a thank you note saying, "Hey, this is Eric. I just wanted to thank you for your time. I really appreciated it. By the way, your dogs were the cutest thing. something like that. That will be more than just, oh, thank you. It's like, oh, he complimented my dogs, or if it's that sort of thing where, like I was mentioning those other people, when I sent them a thank you card, by the way, the follow-up, I did, mention to them, and it's okay to even call it out. P.S. I was the one who loved your pomegranate tree. You can do that, and people appreciate that. You're just being real. That's all you have to do, So that's the kind of stuff that when you door knock allows you to kind of have those conversations. Many times in real estate, you're going to hear, well, you need to bring something of value. Well, what does that mean? Well, bring a market analysis with you. Okay, I have a couple of points of thought on that. You bring a market analysis with you, and what if the average person moves every 9 to 10 years and you're catching them in year 6? They don't really give a crap about your market analysis, okay? Like, oh, that's lovely, we're not moving, okay? Thank you for letting me know that my home was worth more. I kind of knew that anyway. May not have known the exact amount, but I kind of knew that anyway. So thanks anyway. For me, I have learned that it's okay to have something like that, but if the conversation allows it to go, and then that's a great way to follow up, because then it'd be like, well, if you want, I can just send you a general neighborhood market analysis, and that way you just get an idea of how much your neighborhood is appreciated and what the current stats are. And if somebody's interested, oh, that'd be great. Great. What's your name? So obviously I have, and you can even joke around. Obviously I have your address, but what's your name so I can get it correct on there, and then just doing that sort of thing. It's like you've gotten their information and then you send them something to follow up. We talk about in real estate, you always want to set the appointment. And in some trainings, you will find out that's a little misguided, that setting the appointment means that's a buyer consult or listing consult. Setting the appointment is anything that's following up and having it one-on-one, face-to-face. That's what you're doing. So and that follow-up means a lot. We all know that we live in a world that, let's say you're just talking to somebody once and it's face-to-face and then they never hear from you again. Yeah, okay. But if you're consistent and you're following up with people, whether it's a thank you card, whether you promised them something, anything like that, that's when that kind of stuff starts to create that rapport and they remember you more. That's when you become front of mind whenever they need to do something in real estate. So when you're going around door knocking, that's some of the stuff to kind of break the ice, to make it more comfortable. You're going up to somebody's home and it's, from their point of view, they're getting a lot of people coming to their home. So what's the thing that's going to be different from everybody else? Well, most of these people out there are just going to come up and, do you need windows on your home? Do you need a roof? Nope, 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 nope. You come up and you say, oh my God, I love your roses. I love your lavender bush. Nobody has a lavender bush in their front yard. I just think that's the coolest thing. Oh, thanks, blah, blah, blah. You start to have that conversation. Then it allows you to talk to them a little bit more. And then you start to talk about real estate. And you kind of get a feel in it. They're like, no, we're not actually thinking about anything right now. No problem. I totally understand. But that's the reason why I just want to get to know people in the neighborhood. I want to find out, who's interested, who's not, and even how I can help people out in the neighborhood too, because I want to be that go-to person, even if you need a referral, plumber, painter, whatever. I know some really good contacts out there that have done great work. That could be one of the things you bring up. It could be if somebody is thinking about making a move or making a change, one of the things they can bring up is literally, oh, well, let me send you a market analysis. Let me send you some of these things. Any of those things would be a great way. Any questions on initially creating that conversation if you're door knocking? Okay, a cheapy way to do that. Oh,
for I'm not interested, or like those types of things. Like, I am curious about that because I think that we're going to get that mostly, and so to handle how to handle all of those rejections, but still be front of mind.
Yeah, and by the way, a lot of times it's no, is right now. What if, and this literally happened to me last year, one of my good friends, one week he calls me up and he says, Rob, you better get ready. You're probably going to be selling a home in Huntington Beach. Oh, because his best friend died. Nothing that can be predicted. You know, it's not long-term planning, but it's one of those things that happens. So all of a sudden, that's what happens. I have a number, I specialize in seniors. And so I keep in touch with senior community people. And I've had people call me up and say, hey, I've got a lead for you. I have somebody that needs to move in. We just discovered that blah, blah, blah is not going to, the family discovered they're not doing well on their own and they actually need to be in a senior community. So can you talk to them about selling their home because they have to sell their home so they can move in here? Sure, that's out of the blue. But when you're front of mind, that kind of stuff comes up. So I don't want you to think because somebody's saying at that time, no, it's just right now, they just don't have that need. And that's simply what it is. And, you know, right now, I don't have a need for some things. We just put in a whole brand new HVAC system 3 years ago. So if somebody were to come up and say, oh, well, we can replace your blah, blah, blah. I don't need anything replaced. You know, it still sparkles. I mean, it's so new. So I'm good. I bought my car 3 years ago. And if somebody were to say, oh, well, you can upgrade. Well, that would be nice, but I don't need to. You know, my car is doing everything I need it to do. I don't need it. It's not something I want right now. So I'm good. So be fair to people out there because not everybody obviously is turning over their home every 2 years. But when somebody's, you know, if you're asking, well, do you know of anyone, you know, then, you know, you affirm that, you were like, oh, nope, you know, and even when you say, I mean, I say no problem a lot. And so I'm admitting that sometimes that's not always the best, you know, thing. No problem is fine. But, you know, you can also say, I get it. This is a great home and a great neighborhood. And these homes, like if you were talking about my home, it would be, and I could tell these homes are built well, because honestly, our homes are really built well in this neighborhood. And, you know, you could easily say something like that. And then that's when you can transition into, however, if you know of anybody who wants to, who has a need to come into the neighborhood or leave the neighborhood, please contact me because I see why you would want to be here, and I would love to help anybody who would also want to move into the neighborhood, or if something has come up and they need to move out, and you can do that. Does that help a little?
That helps a lot. Thanks.
Okay. And you're basing it, and if you notice the way I'm talking about it is you're basing it on their needs. You know, you're not or their wants. You know, it's like, hey, well, if you happen to know of anyone, and so on. And by the way, if you're having this conversation with somebody and then you send a follow-up note card to them with your business card and says, hey, I really appreciate your time. And thank you so much for,
like the shirt.
Oh, thanks.
I'm much better writing it right now than just saying it. But you could say, thank you so much for considering me if anybody needs to move in and out of your neighborhood. Something like that. You know, you could just, you know, you could put that in a PS. You know, thank you so much for your time. I had such a great conversation. You know, your dogs were great. You know, any of that kind of stuff. And then you sign it Michael, and you sign it Eric, and then you could put PS. I also really appreciated that if you knew of anybody that would want to move or into or out of the neighborhood, you would consider me. That would be a way of just putting it in there. And then you're still putting it in their mind. By the way,
Okay.
I led a, it was called Mindset Reset. It was a month or two ago. And when something goes into our brain doesn't really know whether it's truth or not. So that's the reason why mindset is really such a key thing. So for instance, somebody who, let's say you hear about these syndromes all the time, somebody who's very attractive, but they don't think they're attractive, make really poor decisions based on they don't think they're attractive, even though the truth is they may be very attractive, or they may be very talented, or, you know, or very skilled in something, or any of these things. then what happens though is because they think opposite of that, their brain starts to accept it. This is truth, that I am not that whatever sort of thing. Well, it's the same thing because your brain cannot distinguish what is true or not. So it takes everything as fact. If you write to somebody, if you say to them one-on-one, thank you so much for remembering me, you know, and if anybody needs to move in or out of the neighborhood, I really appreciate it. Okay, you put one little thing in there, and that's only one, but then you write a card and you little note card thanking them for that time, and you put it in there again. Guess what? It's gone in there again. And let's say you have more follow-up conversations with these people. You know, you come back a little while later, you just keep putting it in and in again. That's the other part of being front of mind, because their brain is processing, hey, this person's a realtor and this person really wants to help. And I've agreed that I would consider them. So you're putting it in there. Does that make sense?
And so you're talking about the rehearsal of the brain.
Yes.
Like with
Yes.
the it being repeated.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Okay.
Okay. Some of the okay, one of the good questions is, should I bring anything? Okay, as I mentioned, you know, you can bring something cute. If you want, you could bring, like on the one side, on the Popeyes, you know, like I mentioned that I've sent out to everyone. On the Popeyes, on one side, you could have one thing, but maybe on the back, you could just make market stats. You could put something simple as that. So one side's got the cute little Popeye, oh my God, it's great to have you as a client, you know, sort of thing. And then you can say, by the way, on the back of that is the market stats for this neighborhood. Thought maybe that'd be something would interest you. Simple as that, you know, not hard to do, easy to lay out, cut it, hand it to them, you're done, you know, and it makes it really easy to do. Now, obviously on something like that, you know, you're going to have a little square that's going to be about that big. So you can only put in so much information. By the way, it's better to put in information like that that's big and easy for them to read than trying to fill it up like a Windows Microsoft, you know, system requirements thing where it goes on and on and on and on and on. Less is more, because part of that is not only is it easier to read, it's more pleasing to the eye, so somebody will want to read it. It also gives you a reason to follow up. Because if somebody were to say, oh, this is really interesting, well, I can actually send you more detailed information if you want. This was just something that I was just handing out, you know, as a brief summary, but I can easily send you something else on that too. Oh, and if they're interested, bingo, now you have a reason to follow up. And in that situation, you have two solid reasons for following up. One is a thank you card, thanking them for their time. Secondly, is giving them those resources. So you can easily do that sort of thing. That automatically creates, you know, that sort of follow-up with them. Those are the kind of things that you can bring with you. If I was underneath the assumption when I first started door knocking, I've sent everybody buyer and seller guides. Well, those things can be thick, you know, blah, blah, blah. If I bring that to every single door, one is I'm carrying like a stack of paper with me. And then two, it's like, well, what if they're not interested? Or here it is. But if it comes up in conversation, actually, I have a seller's guide. If that would be helpful to you, would you like for me to send that to you? Yeah, that would be great. Okay, I'll get that to you. Then bingo, there you go. And you could even, in those instances, you could even ask, and this is a little tip, you can ask, well, I can send it to you electronically and I can print it out. And what you're trying to do there is then you get additional information. Because let's say you've gone to the front door and you find out it's Mr. Victor and Sophia Garcia. You have their name, you're at their home, so you have their address. And now they're like, oh, and here's my email address. So you can send that to me. Bingo. Now you can go ahead and send it to them. And now you got their email address too. So now you have more contact information with them. Now, in that, whenever you send something to them, a great thing is to then follow up with a phone call and make sure they got it. That always helps. Now, if it comes email, you can call them up and say, by the way, I sent that to you, or text them. Some people are comfortable with text. Let me give you a tip on that one in a second. but you can follow up with an email and say, hey, I just wanted to make sure you got this. Because sometimes it, whatever reason, I just want to make sure you got this. Bingo, yes or no. Also, let's say they give you their email address. Okay, so you write down their email address. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and mail this to you. Sometimes, as you know, with email, things go into spam all the time. Is it okay if I text you just to make sure you got it? And if they say yes, now you've gotten their phone number, because they're going to give you their phone number so you can text them as well. And most of the time you're not going to get this, but in case somebody were to ask, it's like, hey, this is just for me. It's not going out to companies or any of that kind of stuff. But if they don't ask, don't bring it up. Does that kind of help? A little bit of the tips there? Okay. When it's you can make, by the way, I have discovered when I door knock, having fun makes it so much easier. So when you have something that's cute, it makes it fun. If you can crack a joke, that's appropriate. It makes it fun. If you compliment, it usually makes it fun, because like even when I compliment people, I've had people come up and like, oh my God, your dog is so cute, sort of thing. I've got 2 dogs myself. Really? Oh yeah, and then I start, and I talk to their dog or whatever, that kind of thing, oh, how you doing, little thing, sort of stuff. And I know it sounds funny, but then it's like, oh, and it makes it fun and cute and relaxed. And then both of you can have a conversation. That's what you're doing. What information should I know beforehand? A really good follow-up to that one is information you should know ahead of time is maybe some of the market stats. So if something's currently for sale in the market, not that you have to have everything memorized, but let's say you're door knocking in a neighborhood and you find out, like I have to live on Los Toros and right behind me is Zola. And you're like, oh, you look up, just easily on the MLS or I didn't say this, but some of the other third-party sites like realtor.com, and you see what's in a neighborhood that's available. You just happen to mention some of those things if it comes up. If somebody say, well, what have you seen? Blah, blah, blah. Well, I happen to notice on Zola, they've had this home for sale and it's actually been for sale for a while. And if you know some of those things, let's say they start bringing up real estate stuff. That's a great question. Well, I know that home's been for sale for a while. You can ask anything about that home. Do you happen to know the owners of the home? How long is that home? I noticed that it hasn't sold and it's been for sale for 34 days. Do you happen to know why it may not have gone for sale? Or hey, it went on off the market in only 7 days. It looks like it was a great home. Did you know the owners, or did you ever go to that home? Or do you know anything about that? Anything like that? You're asking them, it automatically creates that conversation. But if you already know something about the market in that area, that kind of helps you do that sort of thing. If you were to, let's say, again, the home is a sale for on Zola, and let's say you look up and you discover that the neighborhood appreciated 9.8%. You can easily work that into the conversation. If people were to ask about real estate stuff, and again, it's not that you're pushing this, it's just things to know in case they ask, but don't think that you have to be a dictionary, because you're not. But that's where they can, ask, something like, oh, well, the home on Zola, I noticed it went on the market. I can see why. I mean, the past year, this entire neighborhood's appreciated by 9.8%. If somebody wanted to make a move, now is an excellent time to do that. So I can see why. Do you happen to know why they're moving? Sort of, and it allows you to have that conversation, and you become the authority. Now, don't be afraid, because I was, and we all are, so don't worry about it. But don't be afraid if somebody were to say something more and you don't have the answer. Again, you are not the library, but you are the librarian. So that's when you can say to them, if they were to ask, well, how much do you think my home is exactly worth? Well, I could give you a rough estimate right now, but if you really need to know, let me get back to you on that, because I'd want to do some research and let you know, what that would be. Sometimes you'll get an oddball question. If somebody were to say, well, if I were to sell my home and buy one just like it, what would the taxes be? Let me find that out for you. Actually, I can even contact escrow and even figure out what's called a net sheet. Would that be convenient for you? Yeah. Then you follow up with that, sort of thing. But see, that's where you're not the library. You don't have all the stuff memorized. You're the librarian. You help them find the information, and you want to be that resource. And by the way, let's pretend you're a library, you're a supercomputer, then you give them the answer and that's it. If you're the librarian, then you say, I will find out the information and now I can follow up with you. Now you can even set the appointment and say, hey, how about if I can find out that information, and let's say you're door knocking at 10 a.m., and you gauge everything. It's like you're door knocking at 10 a.m., but it's on a Saturday. You know what? I can get that information to you on Monday, because that's when I can have escrow who can really give you detailed information on what a net sheet is. Bingo, there you go. So again, you're not the library, but you're the librarian, and it gives you a way to follow up. And then another question was, what neighborhood should I target? That's an excellent question. And we get asked that one all the time, because it's the neighborhood that you want to do business in, kind of makes sense. Now, some guidelines that may seem a little bit obvious: don't do apartment complexes, because yeah, those people, probably not going to be buying or selling. So that's one of them. If you want to do, if you're familiar with a neighborhood, that's great. If you're not familiar with the neighborhood, but you want to work it, go ahead, but then get to know who that neighborhood is. So for instance, one of the first homes I ever sold was in a particular neighborhood, and I was like, oh, okay. And I knew the nickname of the neighborhood. I literally Googled it and looked up, okay, what that neighborhood is. And I looked up some of the demographics of it. I'm like, hey, that could be a neighborhood I would really like to door knock a lot, especially since I have a home that I've done business with, and so on. Let's say you wanted to door knock a home, and one of the homes that was sold in the area was sold from our office. Well, you could do that. For instance, I just sold one in Highland Park a little while ago. I actually helped them buy and sell a home in Highland Park. So if you wanted to work Highland Park, you could easily go over there and you could say, hey, here is one of the homes in our, one of the agents I know just sold a home in the area, blah, 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 blah. And it allows you to have that conversation because you pick that area. But pick an area, you'd be interested in, pick an area that you think would be good. If it's an area where like there's a lot of gates up that's hard to get into, probably not a good area, because honestly, good luck with that. But if you're familiar with it, that helps. Also, if you're adjacent to it or you're willing to work it, that's another thing. Because if it's something like, let's say you wanted to work, I'm just going to pull something out. Let's say you wanted to work Brentwood. I'm just going to put it out there. Well, Brentwood may be a far drive from you. And are you really going to work Brentwood? Sort of thing. Also, if you work Brentwood, how many people are going to be home? A lot of those people may be professionals. You may end up with a lot of that sort of thing. So be aware of that, that you may get people who answer the door and they may be the housekeeper. They may be somebody else. That's the reason why sometimes door knocking, people like to do it on a Saturday, because it just makes it easier to get a hold of people. Or they like doing it in the late afternoon, a lot of times in springtime, because then it's still light out, because they can do that. Here, right now we're beginning to turn that time of the year where it's beginning to get darker earlier. But if you wanted to door knock, let's say around 4 p.m. or so, you probably could get some success off of that. Once it starts getting, even towards dusk, it's like, okay, and you use your rule of thumb. How do you feel comfortable? And how do you think the people feel comfortable about coming to your door when it's dark out? That's one of the other things. So those were a lot of the door knocking questions that came up. And any questions on those?
Yes, if you don't reach the decision maker, such as the maid or whatever, what do you do?
Good question. Yeah, what do you do? Well, you can find out if they're there, obviously. If they're not there, That's where it's a little bit hard. I've been in that situation. That is one where you could follow up. Sometimes you kind of get the feel like, okay, thank you so much, and I just move on because I'm like, okay, this is going to go nowhere. If like there's other times I've had once or twice, so it's not all the time, but I've had once or twice, like literally their housekeeper has been with them for 40 years, almost, and they're like family. So it's like, oh well, thank you so much, blah blah. Obviously, they're still not the decision maker, but you can ask, well, when would they be home? And I just want to introduce myself. Don't want to take a lot of their time, but I just want to introduce myself. They may tell you, and then okay, can you let them know that I'm just going to be stopping by? Here's my card, and I just really appreciated your time, and I just want to get to know the people in the neighborhood. You can try and do that. But it is harder. It really is harder when you don't have the decision maker answering the door. But if you want to get to the decision maker, that's a way in which you can do it. Kind of find out when they'll be there, and just say, hey, you'll be back in the area. And let's say the decision maker, you go back and they're not there. Still send a thank you card. Hey, I just wanted to let you know I appreciated your housekeeper, or whatever, letting me know when you'd be here. Obviously, I missed you, but I just want to thank you for the opportunity. That, something like that. Or just put in a note card if you don't feel a thank you card is appropriate, just saying, hey, I look forward to the opportunity, something like that.
Okay. And then one other thing is if I am familiar with a place, but there are a lot of realtors that I know are like scouting that area. What's my mindset there?
You slash their tires. You can, that's one, it depends on how often they're working the neighborhood. So, the challenge is for every realtor you see out there, or every Starbucks, there's 194 realtor license in California. How many of those people are active? Oh, that's a different story. And also some realtors, the more active they get, if they start doing more referral business, the less time they have to door knock and work a neighborhood, because now they've gotten more busy doing those other things. So just because you think somebody owns an area doesn't mean you can't work it. And for instance, the first home I sold was in a neighborhood that it's actually Joey's neighborhood. I found out he lives there. And a number of realtors live in that neighborhood, but I sold the home. So just because, people live in that, I have people that sometimes sell home, I see something for sale in my area. And I'm fine, because actually my neighborhood isn't really my target neighborhood. I'm like, yeah, there's a few other Whittier target neighborhoods that click better with me. So I just target those. So, no skin off my nose, that's fine. But all that to say, just because somebody's working in a neighborhood doesn't mean you can't work the neighborhood either. And another thing, don't forget its personality. Those of us who've been in relationships, you kind of date a number of people before you start clicking with someone, and then you want to be with them. Well, just because somebody can, they work a neighborhood doesn't mean everybody who's answered the door they've gotten to know they like. In fact, the one home I sold this year on Scenic Drive in Whittier, there was an agent in that neighborhood that actually got pissed off that I sold the home, because she was like, basically she was thinking, I own this neighborhood and I know everybody in the neighborhood. She should be selling all the homes in the neighborhood. Well, guess what, sunshine? Because of her attitude, there was a number of people who didn't want to do business with her in that neighborhood. And I was the one that actually knew someone, and I did business with him. So just because you door knock a neighborhood and a number of other people work that neighborhood doesn't mean you don't have an opportunity there. It's if you build a relationship with those people and you're front of mind, that will give you the opportunity.
Got it. Thanks.
Sure. Anything else on that one? Okay, we're a couple minutes over, but thanks for tracking with me, guys. That'll end, this mentoring session.